Hello, and greetings from the Mirror Zone. I'm Bryce Skidmore.
And I'm David Leskin, and this is the Mirror Zone.
We straight crashed through it with a bunch of strangers we didn't want to be with.
No, and to be honest, I'm kind of glad we crashed through because I didn't like looking at their reflections.
I didn't either. It was a very revolutionary feeling to find out that you wanted to be the only person left on a planet.
Yeah, and the best part was when we recorded all this in our dying state of starvation and madness.
Some astronaut found this in a cave, everyone. This is how you're hearing us.
Yeah, it's Pluto's cave.
Either you're not going to listen to the end of this episode, or you haven't read Joanna Russ's novel We Who Are About To. But if you did, trust me, that's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, we just knocked your socks off. You just don't know it yet. It's like the 5-finger death punch. You have to walk 10 steps and think about our joke before your head explodes.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's weird. I feel fat. Oh.
Yep, and then you die cursing our names in a cave, hallucinating.
No, I'm so stoked that we get to do this. Like, it's been a minute, and I'm glad we can start with Joanna Russ. This novel was published in 1976, and apparently was not well received.
That's right. If you look up some of the details about critical reception, there were quite a few different reviewers who gave it pretty scathing reviews.
Which, like, I think is unfair, because I've read other of Joanna Russ's work. I don't think that this is, like, necessarily, like, the best that she could do, but I think it's a really fascinating novel, and I think one of the reasons why people, like, view it that way is because, like, it is, like, really intensely jarring. Like, it challenges your sensibility, like I think good science fiction should.
No doubt about it. I think that a lot of times you start reading a science fiction story or short story, and you're not expecting necessarily for this sort of the visceral descriptions of what happens, the soul searching, the death. There's plenty of death.
So much.
Yeah, and it really. I'm glad that it took us a little bit of time to do this because I really needed a lot of the themes to sink in before I could really understand it.
No, there's some stuff where it's like just sitting down now and like talking about it tonight, like where I was just like, oh fuck, like
a million oh fucks all the way out throughout this entire book.
No, it's super good. I'm glad we get to do it. And with that, should we do a plot synopsis?
Let's do it. Let's jump right in.
Alrighty. So I'm going to do a plot synopsis right quick. So the novel We Who Are About To by Joanna Russ is about a woman, a nameless narrator, who is not described physically very much, except that we know that she's short. She's shorter than most of the other people in her contingency. She was on an interstellar ship with a bunch of other people when it crashed on this planet, and it's weird. Like, the days are super long, and she's there with only there's 5 other people? So there are only 8 people on this planet, and the narrator really quickly surmises that their chances of survival are very slim, but the group doesn't really see things that way. The group eventually start forming these like really shitty little pocket governments within themselves, and our narrator, who is a musicologist, so she's like the DJ for the ship, and she also carries like a lot of drugs on her. So she's like an apothecary, so like people keep coming to her for medicine. Well, she starts to get like really suspicious of these people like from the get-go, and eventually one of them lets loose on physical violence with the other. A man named Alan hits a woman named Nathalie. Like at that point, she realizes that they now live in a lawless society. The men very quickly sort of manage to wrest control, except Nathalie has the ear of the one dude, so it's this really weird sort of like dictatorship of two, and they start coming up with these really weird ideas like we need to repopulate. So, which is strange. The narrator calls them out and saying that that's kind of bullshit. We don't need more babies, we need drinkable water. The crew doesn't see it that way, so she hightails it out of there on
her broom.
On her broom. It's a transport device that is sort of like a motorized hover stick, and you ride it. So it's like, and this is just, there's that, the narrator carries around drugs, like in potions. So it's like, this has some very definite like witch overtones, especially and eventually because she's not so cool with like the way they do things, she excises herself from society. They get really like antsy about that and they come to kill her, or at least to try and drag her back in. In self-defense, she kills them and has to deal with that. Oh, and I forgot the worst part. Lori.
Yeah, Lori is the child of the group, and she's definitely not able to take care of herself. She's not completely all there.
Like it seems almost monstrous in how merciful it is because it's just coldly merciful.
That's one of the great themes about this story throughout. The narrator, from go, is convinced that they have no chance and that it would be a kindness for them to focus on how they live the quality of their last days rather than trying to forge into some sort of impossible future.
Which I think is super brilliant because that's the plot of like 90% of shit that you will see, that it's like, you know, action adventure in space. We've been stranded somehow far away from home. What do we do? And the whole drama is how we survive. And the reality is you don't.
No.
You don't. And the narrator gets that. Like, you know, she actually would rather just spend the time that she has left, like, being chill, sort of coming to terms with, you know, the shitty hand that they've all been dealt. But instead, like, John Uday, who's one of the people, and Valeria and everyone else, that's not what they want. They want, you know, they think that somehow they can colonize this planet and make it like home again.
Which is why the narrator keeps the poison that she has and the gun she has hidden both very close to her and away from the other people.
Yeah, no, she's definitely brought contraband to the planet, and she will, like, her shit will eventually get searched, and she knows that it will, so she finds really cool, inventive ways to hide her stuff. One of the things that I find super interesting about Joanna Russ, she's like a super interesting writer. If you guys ever get a chance, you should check it out. There's The Female Man is my favorite book that she wrote. But this is a thing I didn't find out until I read the foreword to this book, was that apparently she was at Cornell at the same time as Vladimir Nabokov, the guy who wrote Lolita. So
right.
Like I guess she dedicated And Then Chaos in part to him. So I'm like, that's a cool little thing where it's like the guy who wrote Lolita and my favorite science fiction author, like, you know, we're in the same classroom at one point.
Fantastic connection.
I love that shit. Is it
Well, let's finish off a summary.
Yeah.
So we had gotten to everyone is dead. She's established, even with all of these other people not draining the resources, that she's dying. It's a foregone conclusion, and she resigns herself to starvation and takes herself off to a cave, basically to live out her last days in what turns out to even be last seasons. As far as this book takes us all the way to the end, due to the fact that the whole narrative structure of the story is her recording her thoughts on her vocoder.
Yeah.
She keeps this on voice activated in the cave so that her final thoughts can all be recorded.
Yeah, no, so basically what you're listening to is the narrative of the last human being to survive on this planet, which is like, I mean, it's really cool. It's very like Mary Shelley-esque. She wrote this whole novel called like The Last Man on Earth, and it was like, this novel was placed in a church on this altar, and anything that might come across it can uncover the chronicle of the last man, but the irony is no one will come across it.
Right. We're lucky enough through science fiction lens to be able to hear this narrative, but otherwise it's probably going to ring out empty to the rest of the universe after she passes.
Yeah.
Which does come to pass in this book. It's the final section where our narrator, she begins to hallucinate. She begins to see people in her life.
Yeah, she sees her, and this is a thing that I think we should bring up, is she's a member of a very strange cult called the Tremblers, where it's like, and they're kind of set up to seem like the Quakers, if you're familiar, but like very interested in social justice, very pacifistic, and which makes it sort of all the more shocking that she's like the perpetrator of these crimes. But her faith seems to be one of the only things that like actually leads her to build the appropriate fear and apprehension of the situation she's found herself in. Like, everyone else is just like, you're stupid, you know, you're superstitious, and she's like, no, it's just, I believe that, you know, death isn't something that we all need to fear.
Right, and it's what's so beautiful about the closing of the book is we're not shielded from the idea of death. There's no fantasy that she may have gone to some sort of afterlife, although she muses on a lot of those.
She does, but then she says it's better if it's not true.
It is.
She's like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna see all the fucking people I killed?
Right, which it is bad enough that she's hallucinating them while she's dying, but at least she can look forward to that going away once the starvation ends.
Yeah.
And so the end of the book it's very removed from the beginning two sections in that it's just sort of like contemplation of life. We find out the details about our narrator, what made her the way she is, the people that she met, and what she considers to be important and lasting moments. And with that comes the end of the book.
Did you feel like a bit of closure? Like, I mean, do you feel like sort of that this was a peaceful end for our narrator in a way, or like, do you feel like it was a little problematic?
I mean,
I don't mean problematic like in like, oh.
I felt bad for her.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that she was able to give all these other people the sweet release that she herself craved, but not being able to give that to herself, that she had to go through this lengthy process of dying. It makes me sad, but at the same time, we were there with her in a way.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it? Did you find it problematic?
See, the thing that's weird is I was super on board with it, but it's like you said, once she gets in the cave, things get like I want to say like supernatural, but like not like supernatural like with ghosts, but like way more natural than I bargained for. Like it was just like this. It was, oh wow, now we are sitting in a cave contemplating truly the end of life and all the philosophical baggage that goes on with that.
Right.
So it's like she is hallucinating and seeing crazy shit, but it's almost like I'm like, wow, this is just like relentless, and it's relentless in such a way that it keeps bringing up inescapability of death, but then as she approaches it, her stake in that and what she did to these other people there, where it was like,
and pretty much everything that happens on the planet echoes in the end of her life, and I do think that it is sort of, I was clenched, my whole body was clenched the whole time I was reading that last section of the story, just this sort of drawn out metaphysical contemplation while it's framed in the sense of neurons fizzling out and running out of food, and the body biology narrative is the reasons why, whereas in most other books or stories you talk about the main character dying and they're hallucinating. It's a given that that's why, but they hint that the person dying maybe doesn't realize that, or is too out of it to know the difference between reality or not. And our narrator, for the most part, has a very cold, strong grasp on reality through the entire ordeal and up to the very end.
Yeah.
And it was a challenging read. I was very affected.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's part of the thing that actually made this super powerful to me was that entire end where it was like, I'm like, and it was weird because it's like everybody's dead about halfway through the novel. Most of it is, or like the whole solid second half is mostly just her living in solitude. The thing that really freaked me out about it was just, there's this poem by William Blake called The Book of Thel, and it sort of touches weirdly upon a similar ontological principle that is very frightening to all of us, and that's like just sort of what happens as we approach death, and this novel tried to do it. But the line from Blake is like, towards the end, why cannot the ear be closed to its own destruction, or the glistening eye to the poison of a smile? Yeah,
and in the same way, I totally get what you're saying, and I feel like there's just this sort of constant holding in of breath that you feel. You're waiting for the contraction, you're waiting for it to disperse, and the story doesn't give you that release. You're dragged along, you kind of feel like you're taken to the precipice of death through her descriptions as she passes.
Yeah. There was almost a part where I'm just like, well, just fucking kill yourself, man. Like you can. You can. You literally have. You're
close.
Yeah, you're the only one on the planet with implements to kill yourself. But it's like, no, she wasn't about that. She wanted to die the way she wanted to die.
And it was a pretty spectacular way to go out. She, there's sections where she recites everything that she's ever known for the most part, or everything that's important to her, out loud. Between, when she was trying to get away from the people when they're finally all dead. And it's like, this isn't just the process of somebody dying, this is the process of somebody compartmentalizing everything that made them who they are as they die.
No, it kind of reminded me of Gaspar from the Ellison story that we read, where it was like, every memory he put together, and he gave Minna to Billy Canetta for safekeeping. Like, he remembered someone to someone else, but it's like, if I just take my intellect or like everything that I know about this person or this series of events and I just embody it in something, then it won't have been for nothing.
And in a way, that is how her death works. Is she talks a lot to the others before they all pass away, before she kills them, I should say, about wanting to die, about death being the only sane course of action. But she does embody her situation and what she had to do to survive and lets that be what keeps her going rather than just taking that way out that she even espouses to them.
Yeah. Man, that's like, this is a thing about this story that's really crazily, like, I want to say empowering in a weird way for me, but it's like, it really is that, like, I mean, you have sort of an obvious overtone with feminism, with a control over one's own body.
Right.
You know, the entire, like, the big rupture of society begins when a man hits a woman, and then later they all think that they have a right on the women's bodies of the party. Like, it's like, oh no, you're a breeding machine now. And she's like, no, I'm not. I refuse to do that. I refuse to submit to this. And then when that happens, like, yeah, she refuses to submit because she's like, we're all going to die here. It's pointless to try, so maybe we can just die in peace. And they wouldn't let her, so...
They won't let her die in peace. They won't let her get away. I mean, you know, if she has to force her philosophy of freedom on them by force, then that's what she has to do.
See, no, and it's like, I'm on her side the whole time, but then you put it that way, and I'm just like, oh, that's the perverse dark side.
It is the dark side of it, and it's why I think she doesn't take an easier way out, is I think she's sort of wearing these killings of what she had to do as burdens upon herself that she needs to live through all the way to the end.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, like,
it's why she's haunted by the ghosts of them.
Yeah, it's like she actually did real wrong, and that's why she's not going to kill herself, because she's going to feel the remorse of it the whole time.
Yeah, and she does. I mean, as her mind is going, what we're talking about are all the things that she muses out loud to herself.
I find it incredibly interesting, the tropes that this novel breaks.
Yeah, it's definitely all about deconstruction.
No, and it's like, what was that Vonnegut that you were talking about earlier? The Samuel Delany bit?
Right, so in the forward of our edition, the reprint, Wesleyan U Press edition, Sam Delaney has this quote about how Kurt Vonnegut would characterize what the tropes that this is skewering, I would say. At the height of the New Wave, an SF convention that particularly exercised editor Moorcock at New Worlds was what Kurt Vonnegut had already characterized as the impossibly generous universe of science fiction. When in the real world, 95% of all commercial airline crashes are 100% fatal, and we live in a solar system in which presumably only one planet can support any life at all. From the 30s to the 50s, science fiction was nevertheless full of spaceship crashes, in which everyone gets up and walks away from the wreckage unscathed, and usually out onto a planet with breathable atmosphere, amenable weather, and a high-tech civilization in wait nearby. This is the fundamental convention Russ's novel takes to task.
Oh, I love that quote. It's so perfect.
It is really perfect because you can imagine this story being done by any other science fiction writer and it would play out a bunch of different ways. But I was honestly shocked at the way that this one played out. Totally different from anything else I've ever read.
Yeah. No, and it's like, I love that too, where it's like the attack on something like, or like the way Kurt Vonnegut describes science fiction as being impossibly hospitable.
Right. Well, it's all about like the heliocentric theory and human history of, you know, just assuming that because all the fertile conditions for us to have the thought about why we have these fertile conditions is there, that means that that's what everything is like everywhere.
Yeah.
Especially in science fiction.
No, exactly. And it's like, and I love it too, because it's something that really, I don't like to nitpick everything to where I don't enjoy it anymore, but like, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes when I watch Star Trek, like, I'll be like, oh look, you could just walk on this planet, it's fine, like the gravity's not crushing you, you can breathe the air, there's, you know, that wonderful delicate balance of 2% oxygen to the rest of the nitrogen that is ideal for human breathing. No, it's just all perfect, man. Go out. The universe is your fucking oyster. Like, and I like this because it's like they can't trust the water. Like, they can't trust the food, the grass, nothing.
It's surprising that they are able to survive even as much as they are on this crash-landed planet at all.
Yeah.
The little bit that they get is more just to sink in the fact that they're doomed. And you know, something else that this is an aside. Call me crazy. The first thing I thought when I saw Lost in Space, the movie, you know, the remake with Matt LeBlanc.
Yeah.
Matt LeBlanc and Heather Graham are going to be sleeping together, right?
Oh, totally.
Like that's how that plays out.
That's how that movie's going. It's got it. Yeah.
That's pretty much the first thing that comes to mind, and you know, that's exactly the first thing that came to these people's minds. I'm not sure they were thinking about Heather Graham when they were thinking about the narrator, but I can't confirm or deny that.
Well, no, and it's true. This is like, and it's a wonderful deconstruction of that Flesh Gordon thing, where it's
exactly.
Yes, look at us, we're sexy people in space. Of course, we're going to bone, and it's like, maybe you won't.
There's another movie, Supernova. You ever seen that one?
I've never seen Supernova.
a bunch of blah 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 science fiction horror stuff happens. We don't need to go into it. It's not a great movie. But the end of the movie has the two final main characters, who are of course incredibly sexy, boning in their escape pod as they go jump into hyperspace.
Oh, naturally.
It's like it's the first thing we think about. It's space, the final frontier. When we gonna bone?
Yeah, when can we fuck in it? Which is like wonderful because unless we can figure out a way to like to have basically to have like sort of a gravitational type body blood pressure on in space, we won't get boners in it.
No, not at all. A lot of things people need to think about when they go in space. I would definitely put boners pretty high up on that list.
Yeah, like you can't fuck anymore in space. Like, and that's a thing that The Expanse didn't tell me.
That's true. Come on, Star Wars, tell me these things.
Star Wars, come on. We're looking at you, Star Wars.
Yeah, I think that, I have a lot of things to say about The Last Jedi that we don't need to make about this podcast, but I think Rian Johnson really could have brought up space fucking.
Yeah.
Missed opportunity.
Side note, tune into our Star Wars podcast.
Right.
Our 8-part feature on The Last Jedi.
Our 8-hour each feature on The Last Jedi. That will end with pretty much bra burning. I'm wearing a lot of bras that day.
I'm burning all of my bras.
We twisted away a little bit. Let's jump on our broomstick and hop slightly back in. That's how I heard it in my head too, by the way.
Yes, it's like a little whirring, like
It kind of like the Jetsons singing.
I love the Jetson space cars.
Me too. They have the best noise.
No, and this is a thing that I think is interesting, where it's like it's a story that is couched in a great deal of this violence, pitting survivors against survivors, but it's all based on this sort of like philosophy of personal liberty, and then you eventually see like what toll that takes on the narrator. But like, I love this quote that Samuel Delaney gives. He says, "Radically, Russ suggests that the quality of life is the purpose of living, and reproduction only a reparative process to extend that quality. Only a feudal or fascist societies can really believe wholly that reproduction, i.e. the manufacture of cannon fodder, is life's point." I love that because it's just like one of the things that she brings up right away when they're like, "Oh, we need to all start fucking so that we can have more babies," and she's like, "We don't even have clean water."
Priorities, people.
Like, can you not, like, who's gonna want to live if we don't have food? Like, you want to make more people?
She's not shocked about it though. She's just sort of disappointed and resigned to it that they have to start going down that road almost immediately.
Yeah, and there's a thing that I admire about her, and I don't know if it's like it's part of her religiosity or if it's just intrinsic to her as a person, but she does keep her own counsel. Like, she's completely sovereign of herself.
Yeah, and that's what part of the big fight is about. It's not about necessarily the physical fight with them about not having to reproduce itself, but being able to have her own inner narrative that's different from everyone else's and not... Mm-hmm. And be able to know that she believes that no matter what, that they can't change that.
Yeah. No, so much so that she has to, like, lock her vocorder at one point.
That's right. I mean, she does start getting paranoid, and rightfully
so. Yeah. What was that saying? You're not really paranoid if everyone's out to get you.
Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you.
Exactly.
And these people are definitely out to get her.
They super are. I like this other Delaney quote too. Russ's refusal to avoid the realities of death, both as a social and personal fact, and a rich discursive field for metaphysical elaboration, is one of her major writerly strengths. Again and again, it brings her writerly ironies to a limit point beyond the place where it can easily resolve them into comedy or correspondingly into preachment.
I know. The fact that this whole story takes place from the musings of a person's recorder, it's what makes it so legitimate as a storytelling thing, where you don't feel like you're being preached to necessarily, because it all feels organic, that this is the kind of stuff that this character would be talking about and thinking about.
Yeah.
But it does really straddle the line between, wait, this was a survival book, and now we're just talking about like the meaning of life. Mm-hmm. It's jarring, but it fits well with her state of mind, and it allows Russ to be able to make those points using the narrator as a platform.
It's just a wonderful 118 pages of like this laser focus of accepting one's own death.
Yeah, I love it. Like what they said, there's no shying away from it. Death is front and center in this book, and there's not necessarily fear involved in it, but there is inevitability.
There's actually something about it that kind of reminds me of like that Douglas Adams spirit, where it's like, well, all right, I'm writing a science fiction book, chapter 1, the Earth explodes. Great.
Yeah, that's where our story really starts.
Yeah, no, and it's like interesting because it's like 90% of the time it's like I gotta get back to Earth, or like I have to save the Earth. Fuck it, Earth's not a thing anymore. What do you do now?
Yeah, I would definitely compare this and Hitchhiker's Guide, both having that feeling of like you take away having a home to go back to, and what you're left with is who people basically are.
Yeah.
Who they are home at this point. Whoever they are is their home now.
No, stuck on the heart of gold with crazy ex-president.
Yeah, he's just this guy.
John Uday wishes he was Zaphod Beeblebrox.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody wishes they were Zaphod Beeblebrox, but that's beside the point.
What was it? I have this note because I got a fucking degree in languages, and goddamn it, I'll use them sometimes. But the title of the book we were about to is actually a classical quote. It's from Suetonius's The 12 Caesars, and it's Ave Imperator Mortui te salutant, which translates to Hail Emperor, those of us who are about to die salute you. And it's like supposedly something that a bunch of gladiators said in the arena addressing Claudius.
Yeah. And that's been addressed in quite a different bits of media too, that quote.
Yeah, no, it's a very pervasive quote. It's one of the weirdest things to stick with us from antiquity, because I feel like people say we who are about to, and they don't really know the full implications of that.
Yeah, but this book embodies the full implications of that.
Yeah, I was talking to my dad about this. He's like super into classic rock and not really into science fiction. So I'm like, yeah, we're doing a book. It's We Who Are About To. He's like, rock?
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, Dad, it's We Who Are About to Rock.
Man, now I need to re-listen to this book with like a curated playlist history, and that's going to be number one.
Oh God, yeah. No, start out with that. You gotta get Back in Black there somewhere.
Okay. We might need to do this.
You know what? That actually might be fun. Just like for each story we do, we should probably just start doing like a Spotify playlist.
We should. That's a very good idea.
I was absolutely shocked at how many people were like inspired musically by Bradbury. On our SoundCloud, I reblogged a bunch of the stuff.
That's
it's
right.
Like, yeah, there's.
Isn't it nice how much rock and sci-fi do go together so well?
Oh my God! Just like it's like I'm not even gonna say it's like peanut butter and jelly. It's like fucking chocolate and peanut butter.
Oh yes.
Like, it's sinfully delectable, and it's like, and David Bowie knew it.
David Bowie knew it 100%.
There's a reason Pink Floyd, like, all their t-shirts say first band in space, like, because rock stars are fucking cool, and they know space is cool.
Yep, and that's why they know they're cool.
Shall we do some quotes?
Let's do it.
Was it actually, I'm gonna just read, because we like doing openings, and I'm gonna put this aside instead of our 5, but... So if you read the title page and the first line of the story together, it creates a link between, like, it creates a full sentence. Or the title, We Who Are About to Die, and so on. We're all going to die. The Sahara is your backyard. So is the Pacific Trench. Die there and you won't be lonely. On Earth, you're never more than 13,000 miles away from anywhere. Which, as the man said, is a tough commute, but the rays of light from the scene of your death take little more than a tenth of a second to go anywhere. We're nowhere. We'll die alone.
I love that quote and the fact that it follows the title, because it instantly jumps us right in, you know what I mean? Like, the fact that this is all narrated on the recorder, the fact that the title's said, and then immediately it launches into the actual dialogue of the story. What a great way to start. It
is, and it's actually very classical as well, because it's like, there's the epic poem by Virgil, the Aeneid. Like, the Romans didn't have titles for poems. You just referred to a poem as the first line of the poem. The Aeneid would have been called by Romans the Arma Verum Moicano, because it's the first lyric of that poem. But We Who Are About to Die is the first lyric of this epic.
First lyric, best lyric.
First lyric, best lyric. She is a musician, so like...
That fits, yeah, it does fit pretty well.
John Uday said, "Come on now. Come on, dears. It's a tagged planet. It has to be. Too much coincidence otherwise, eh? The air, the gravity. Now if it's tagged, that means it's like Earth. And we know Earth. Most of us were born on it. So what's there to be afraid of, eh? We're just colonizing a little early, that's all. You wouldn't be afraid of Earth, would you? Oh sure. Think of Earth. Kind old home. Think of the Arctic. Of Labrador, of southern India in June. Think of smallpox and plague and earthquakes and ringworm and pit vipers. Think of a nice case of poison ivy all over, including your eyes. Status asthmaticus. Amoebic dysentery. The Minnesota pioneers who tied a rope from the house to the barn in winter because you could lose your way in a blizzard and die 3 feet from your house. Think, while you're at it, of tsunamis, liver fluke, the Asian brown bear, kind old home, the sweetheart, the darling place. Think of Death Valley in August.
Yeah, I mean, just because the planet is tagged, that doesn't mean any.
Yeah, that does not mean shit's gonna go well for you.
No, not at all. I mean, if you had a planet that had only one of Earth's deadly microclimates, you would be in real trouble.
Yeah, or just like, just some, I'm sure there's something here that's comparable to smallpox. No, and it's like, I love that too, where it's like, oh, we'll be fine, it's just like Earth. Earth isn't that fucking safe either.
Yeah, I mean, he's rationalizing. He's trying to make them all buy into the fantasy that they're, the brave colonial explorers on a mission to save themselves and, humans.
No, and I think it has a wonderful ecological message to it as well, where it's, a lot of people do have this eye towards terraforming, as it were, towards taking a land that's there and then reshaping it to suit your purpose. And I'm not saying that that's utterly a bad thing, because it has been helpful. It's also not exactly been advantageous. We've learned sometimes when enough time passes. But I love that John Uday's immediate assumption that, well, no, it's great. It'll be just like Earth. And our narrator is actually a little too well versed in Earth. She knows it a little too well, where it's if you actually think about it, any environment is a little too immersive. You'll still have tsunamis, so I don't know why you're saying...
If you want to think about the parts of the Earth that are actually habitable by people all year round, I mean, you're not going to hope that large portions of a planet are going to be like that just because they were Earth-like.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it sort of gives the illusion that, oh, well, they were going to terraform here eventually, we're just here a little early. Yeah, you're here early in the part where people die. If they don't terraform the place.
No, and that's it's another thing I wanted to bring it up when we did our episode on Bradbury, but it kind of reminds me of this here, is the history regarding the Roanoke colony.
Yes.
But yeah, the first colony being the one that's lost, that's not a new story.
This is, in a way, sort of the intergalactic horror Roanoke story.
Yeah.
I never thought about that, because I was always comparing this to,
oh, fuck, and if it is a tagged planet, if someone shows up eventually...
Yeah, all they're gonna find is her recording and a bunch of, skeletal corpses.
Oh my god, no. Her dead body in a cave, the skeletal recording, and then 6 bodies strapped to... Or no, it's 6. 6 bodies strapped to a broom flying around.
Yeah, and man, that's what's so great about this story is it's closed at the end of it. You do get closure, but if this is like the Roanoke story, somebody else is going to come along and maybe the cycle continues.
Yeah. No, and then that would be a little too like Bradbury too, where it's
that would be very like
you just keep becoming the Martians.
Right. How many other planets? What made these people crash here? And is that this might happen again? And God, if you land on that planet having these same hopeful feelings with your own shipwreck crew, and then this is what you find what happened to the last group of people, at least maybe then you give up on hope a little faster.
Just a little bit. I mean, or at least I'd like to think that, we would be in the position of, hey, would you like to look after the Overlook during the winter? And it's well, what happened to the last guy? Died horribly. No, I don't need to travel that way. I'm good.
Here's the new boss, same as the old boss. Ghost Boss.
Ghost Boss.
Starring Kevin Bacon. This fall.
I would watch that movie.
I would watch that as well.
Alright, I said. Nathalie the leader. Wait till Alan finds out he can beat you up. Alright, so you think you have the chance of a snowball in hell? Maybe you do. But I think that some kinds of survival are damned idiotic. Do you want your children to live in the old Stone Age? Do you want them to forget how to read? Do you want them to do you want to lose your teeth? Do you want your great-grandchildren to die at 30? That's obscene. Here, the ground came up and hit me, as it always does. Does when you get carried away. It was Cassie, standing over me, shouting, "Shut up! Shut up, you!" I don't think she hit me, only pushed. I wasn't ready, that's all. Rabble-rousing, that used to work. But that doesn't work now, because it's the wrong rabble and the wrong rouse. Well, we all know that. And in everyone's face, the flash of realization, no law.
Yeah, this right here is like the struggle for the first beginning of the book. It's like the narrator keeps trying to drive home to them the flaws in their logic and the situation that they're actually in. But when she flat out lays it out, like, this is really what our situation is.
It speaks volumes to just the human condition anyways, because it's like, how many people would do this? Where it's like, I'm trying to tell you an inconvenient truth. Shut up, shut up, shut up, I can't hear you.
Cassie doesn't want to hear this at all. Neither do the rest of them.
No, and it's like, and that's the thing that's the hardest thing to accept, is the thing that she knows inherently, is that there is no law.
No, not at all. And you know, it's why she always has to stay one step ahead of them and predict what their temperaments are going to be, because she's seen this coming, that society is breaking down.
Which, and this is a thing, they don't really go into it in the book, or she doesn't really go into it in the book, but I hold it in my mind. I think that's because she's like an apothecary, as it were, because she knows sort of what people need, like what they need, like what they either want to get high on or what would be useful for them. So she knows about their physical and their euphoric needs, as it were. So I think that she is kind of weirdly good at reading people like that.
She's very good at reading people, and I think that the only reason that she really gets pushed in this situation is, like she said, the wrong rabble, the wrong rouse. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes we get upset in a situation where we know we shouldn't tell the whole truth. Mm-hmm. And we go a little far and we say more than the whole truth. Mm-hmm. And it can damn us.
Yeah.
That's what our narrator finds out. Day 5. We worked 18 hours, slept, worked again. Alan has reverted to the intensely polite, self-suppressing youth everyone knew and loved. My feet hurt. I tried to explain about orthopedic malfunctions, and I was told that I was malingering. Then my ankles swelled out most satisfactorily in the evening, looking distressingly like small cantaloupes. And everyone was most apologetic. I said, no, I had to carry my share. Then my ankles got even more so. Cassie washed them. The great nurse. Sexpot. Earth Mother. We went to bed. She said, "Tss." Me. What? She. You ever had an orgasm? Me. Can't remember. She. Liar. I mean during fucking. I never did. Women are all liars about it, like Vicky Graham. She just pretends to show off, you know? Silence. She. Ever want babies? Me. I don't know. Sort of. Not really. She. I do. Silence. She. They don't let you if you're poor. But here. Me. I see. Well, good luck. How are you going to handle the men? She just laughed. Then she said with perfect certainty, those babies'll love me, not their daddies. She nudged me. Hey, Madhead, Uday and Graham are going to take your pills away from you in the morning. And who told them, you bloody traitor, said I. Shh. She looked around uneasily, then whispered, I did. She added, but I told you too, didn't I? I love this. This is, there's so many great conversations between Cassie and the narrator that sort of like swing between this idea of embracing life in a fantasy way and embracing certainty in death. And I think this is one of the better passages that does that.
No, I think you're right. No, Cassie is like super interesting to me. In fact, of all of the characters, if you could say that you like anyone in this, I mean, I like the narrator.
I do too.
She's cold and scary sometimes, but I like her. The only other person who kind of approaches that is Cassie. But she's like...
She's a foil.
She is a foil, yeah. She's like the exact opposite.
Yeah, and it's what's really great is they both are very sold into whatever their own philosophy is, even though those philosophies are at odds with each other, but they still have this weird rapport.
Mm-hmm. No, there's this attitude that she has where... Just like how are you going to handle the men? It's like, I'm going to have the babies, and the babies are going to love me, not their dads.
Right, and this is, of course, all assuming that she survives childbirth and that her babies live and that all of them live and they don't die after 5 months of running out of food.
And this is the thing that, like, really got to me, and we don't know much more about the world that they came from. We kind of know...
We get these little hints.
We get little hints. We know what everyone's, like, economic status is. We know that there's, like, kind of an invasive government. But this thing that Cassie says... like, you know, she's like, you ever want babies? And the narrator's like, I don't know. And Cassie says, I do. They don't let you if you're poor, but here. Like, she wasn't allowed.
This was her fantasy.
Yeah. And that's, like, so sad to me that this is, like this is a thing that you could systematically oppress this woman so much. Because it's like, they talk the narrator talks about sort of her messed up life and jumping from job to job and like having been a dancer, like having been so many things but never being able to like stick like to make a good living at any one of them. She was too poor, and so poor that she couldn't have a kid, and she had to get shipwrecked on a planet with a bunch of misogynist assholes to even have a baby. And it's like it's turning like a thing that she would want into already just the grossest like consolation.
Yeah, and you know, it's actually another one of these tropes that I love is being sort of taken apart is the idea of there's always one member of the shipwrecked crew who totally wants it. Their old life was not what they wanted at all, and this is their new chance for rebirth into who they were really supposed to be, because now they have their own law. And the truth is, she couldn't be farther from the truth. She's not going to control anybody. She's going to get subjugated, and they're all going to die anyway.
Yeah.
So it is really tragic that this specific tiny little circumstance is the only way she could have ever gotten her dream, and also it's never going to work out.
Yeah. No, and this is just gonna sound strange, but like some people, they say you can tell me anything a little too liberally, but I think that this is interesting that she decides to confide in one person about her stash, and that person immediately turns her over to everyone else, and she's like, "Are you fucking traitor? You told." And she's like, "Yeah, but I told you too." And that is an attitude that some people have, where it's like, I could play both sides, like.
Oh, no doubt about it. I think everybody who dies was willing to play the game, and that's what got them all killed.
Oh God, yeah.
Is they were willing to take sides against the narrator, and no matter what side you ended up on, the narrator ended up being the one that was right.
Yeah, no, I love that. I can't wait till we get to that quote, because it's just so good.
I said, John Donne, John with your breeches on, John Whittington, turn again, Lord Mayor of London town. We are dead. We died the minute we crashed. Plague, toxic food, deficiency diseases, broken bones, infection, gangrene, cold, heat, and just plain starvation. I'm just a trembler. My God, you're the ones who want to suffer. Conquer and control, conquer and control. When you haven't even got stone spears, you're dead. There's a lot of these passages which are sort of microcosms of all of the themes in the book smashed together.
Yeah.
And this was a really good example of that, I love, where you've got our narrator she's cheeky, she's not completely humorless about the situation they're in, she just wishes that they would be too.
Yeah.
And
well, then this is really weirdly like one of the things that makes Yoda wise to me is that he's funny.
Exactly. I mean, God, imagine a dour Yoda. That's an Empire Strikes Back I don't even want to think about.
No, exactly. Like, no, and it's like, you know, John Dunn, John with your britches on. Like,
yeah.
She makes so many, like, of these little, like, jokes.
She does, and you know, I think it's not completely lost on the rest of the people there, but to them it seems like she's taunting and antagonizing them, and it just makes them even more aggressive and angry towards her.
Which is fascinating, because it's like, from her point of view, she's just being honest, and it's like, I love this thing that she brings up where it's like, I'm just a trembler. Like, I'm just someone who, like, believes absolutely, not necessarily that there is a God, but that there is a right way to act. And she's like a super affected, like, Marxist Christian type of thing, where it's like, and it's like, I don't even know if they really admit, like, she doesn't even really believe in an afterlife, but she's super religious. But she's like, I'm just a trembler. My God, you're the ones who want to suffer.
Right.
Conquer and control. You just want, like, yeah, it's like you're, like, this colonialism that you've decided to do to, like, extend your own life, like, is just going to make you suffer.
Yeah, and she's willing to die for her faith, but their faith is making them put themselves in harm's way and you know, suffer for no reason when they don't have to, and make her suffer, which is, I think, far more egregious in a way, because it's like she gave them several opportunities to let her go, to let her be, and she really wouldn't have come back and attacked them or anything. Far from it. She tried to get as far away from them as possible, but they want to keep her in there in the suffering with them.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
It is, and it's like, it's almost, it's a thing that really, like, kind of, like, fucks with me a little bit, is when I think of survival situations, there are some people who will just, like, deplete your resources and fuck you over. I'm actually thinking about this where it's, like, towards the end, like, you haven't even got stone spears, you're dead. Like, you think that you could do a number on this planet? You think that you could repopulate it?
You're nothing.
You're nothing. Like, and not only are you nothing, but it's like, you don't even know about, I think there was even like I think we're going to come to it later, I think it's one of the quotes I picked out, but it's like, you don't even know the technology of the ship you were flying here on.
No.
Like, it was all very well hidden from you, the people on the deck class. So, like, basically these people have nothing. And once they crash land, there's one dude who, like, they have, like, one, like, storage box full of fresh water. And when she comes back, he's fucking bathing in it. Alan is.
There's always one.
There is. And it's, like, the only drinking water basically just has Alan's balls all up in it now. And it's like, these people, yeah, like, if that's how you're gonna react to being stranded, you are as well be dead. Like, and I love it. She just, like, took one look at that and was like, yeah, we're all gonna die. Like, it's...
Yeah, she could tell pretty quickly, and I don't think we talked about this yet, but we talked about it a little before the recording. Everybody's roles before the ship crashed, when they had all of society behind them, they kind of take that to the planet a little bit, but it's slowly shattered and destroyed. As an outsider, as a servant class, as somebody who's been downtrodden, and her religion, the narrator isn't really changed. I think her beliefs are confirmed, if anything, from her landing there.
Yeah.
And for the person with faith, she has the clearest view of what's going to happen, of any of them.
Yeah. No, I think the closest she ever really gets to changing is just that acknowledgement of, well, maybe I could have spoken to them in such a way where the violence wouldn't have been necessary, but that's not where we ended up.
No, and it humanizes her that she laments that, but at the same time, I really don't see any other way that this would have gone out other than extending everybody else's suffering before they died.
Yeah. So everybody's like super insistent on this fucked up breeding program, and it's already kind of obvious that like the narrator is getting the shit end of the stick. There is one child with the group, Lori, who is like she's not very well looked after by her parents. Her dad kind of, but like her mom is not really a very good mom. But she talks to this girl all the time, and like she's already kind of being seen as like, you know, like a nanny mother type deal, and now this is getting like sort of a little, it's starting to get a little Handmaid's Tale, and she wants to go, so she's just like, listen, I whispered, just managing to speak, I'll go away. Take the broomstick and send it back very slow so you can catch it. Go upstream, downstream, doesn't matter. Try the water, take no food, just leave me. No, Nathalie said. Why? I coughed some more. If you've got to do it, I've got to do it, said Nathalie. You don't have to. And I cleared my throat at last. We better keep an eye on her, Nathalie said to John Uday. I think I put my head in my hands. Suppose they found my gun, my things. Wait long enough and it won't matter. Although I can always do it. Anyone can do it. Easy enough to kill if it doesn't matter about being found out. Then perhaps they'd kill me, and it would be over. And that's all right. But I'm afraid of waiting too long. Eroding. Purpose all gone. Slipping into no decision, no purpose. Hard enough as it is, God knows. I think everyone loves it here because their choices are all made for them. We were never very comfortable with our fate in our own hands, were we? Better to act on the modern religion, an incarnation of the immortal germplasm, nostalgia for the mud, simplicities.
Yeah. Everybody feels brainwashed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Except for the narrator, and it's scary.
Yeah. Well, no, and it's like, I love that thing. It's like she even understands, like, everyone, I know you love it here because your choices are already made for you. Like, there is actually, if you were to live on a planet with no law and everything you did matter so fucking hard, yeah, it would be very hard to even function. And it's like, I love that she even brings up that, where it's like the slipping into no decision, no purpose, where it's like, it would be easy to just do nothing. But she's like, no, I'm actually not going to go along with you, and I'm not.
And it's the stronger choice, and it's the harder choice.
It is. And it's like even harder because she's being ganged up on for it. And I love that too, where it's like she understands. She says straight up, it's like easy enough to kill. She knows where her gun is. Like she's not so naive that she doesn't see what's happening.
She's being very practical about it. She's steeling herself for it the whole time.
Mm.
By writ and tort, by hullabaloo and brouhaha, I declare this tape deck locked to all voice prints but mine. Locked RE playback, locked RE printout, and may God have mercy on your soul. We talked about this before, but at this point in the book, her paranoia has reached its height.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she's not wrong. I mean, you know, they are all after her, but it's gotten so bad that she's locking her voice recording to herself. And if you think about it, that's crazy. Like, who's going to even care about her recording?
Yeah.
But it's the state of mind that they put her into.
Well, no, and it's like, this is I read this actually because you're right. Like, what is what does it really matter if they can get at her voice recorder or not? Like, I mean, I guess they could erase it, but it's like...
But it's what it represents.
It's what it represents. But then there's also this deal, too, where it's like, I read it sort of as this weird, I am now locking them out of this story. Like, basically, it's like she's taken the agency over the story right now, and it's like, it is literally just all hers, and it's like, and I'm literally locking everyone else out of
this is her story
command
now.
prompt, yeah.
Yeah, and she's taken her agency back. No matter what they say she has to do, they can't control her insides or her internal world.
No, and speaking of calling strong women witches, this is a thing that I find interesting, is she moves out of town on a broomstick and starts asserting her own agency, and they think she's crazy. I guess to some people that does look crazy.
Yeah.
But
it looks crazy when it upsets the natural order.
This is a conversation I used to have with people about Hamlet, about whether or not he was crazy, and I think even if his dad wasn't there and he was seeing him, I still don't think that he's crazy, because sometimes an extreme reaction to that type of loss and trauma
is a natural reaction.
It is. It's like, but it's just to freak out and throw your arms. Yeah, go ahead and do that. If you suffer something that is that bad, yeah.
Absolutely.
In the words of Norman Bates, we all go a little mad sometimes. Like, I'm not saying put on your mom's dress and stab someone, but
sometimes you gotta live your truth.
You do, and it's like sometimes your truth looks like screaming at things and being outcast.
Yeah, and she's the life that she's already had has gotten her very ready for this role.
Yeah, no, she'd been arrested over and over again for her social justice warrior stuff that she was doing, all of the protests. So it's like she had spent some time behind bars just by nature of her religion and the protesting, or in the Protestant nature of it.
Right. I mean, it's definitely, this situation fits her worldview of what she can expect from life, from humanity, and from those around her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is after, she's been hauled up in the cave for a while. She sneaks out, steals the broom, and she's come upon by her former roommates, as it were. She shoots John Uday. And this is when Cassie wanders into the cave. She remarked conversationally, "The prof person said you'd be up here. Along the water somewhere. Frankly, you should have gone a lot farther away. A hell of a lot farther. That's what I would have done. I told them to let you alone." I said, "Cassandra?" She said, I know. If I had a baby, it would die, and if it didn't, I would die. Anyway, my ma had me by cesarean. She said, "I could tell you all about it. The kind of anesthetic, the scars, the stitches. God knows I heard about it enough." She laughed. Swaggering Cassandra, the beautiful waitress, born to be a star, born to be a loser, doesn't know that hard births don't run in families. Not as simple as that. "Oh, damn them," she said. "Damn them. Don't they ever even come back to look?" Yeah,
and you were talking to me before about this quote about people not realizing that they've stumbled upon an inherent truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's one of my favorite things in literature, and it's you can only really do it in literature. In a completely fakely constructed situation, can you engineer a character to encounter a series of events antithetical to their own personal philosophies, to say something, and for it to accidentally be true, even though they're full of shit.
Yeah, it's a perfectly designed moment.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Let me just do this one.
Mm-hmm.
It was right next to my note. The 1% chimes in. So this is one of the people, Valeria Graham, who is she is the wife of Victor and the mother of Lori, and she was incredibly rich on Earth, and that has allowed her to have essentially anything that she wants. Her husband is a trophy husband. Her daughter essentially is almost the same thing.
A bought daughter.
Exactly. She used all of this money to scientifically engineer the means through which she can have this girl, and it really is just a fucking prop. Because she's the uber capitalist of this story, and I think that's interesting to have an uber capitalist character, and that it's this woman.
You show how much that means nothing once they actually crash, and once money has no meaning anymore.
Exactly.
And she's left with the decisions she's made, and it shows what kind of person she is.
Yeah. No, Valeria's an interesting character for that.
Very.
No one has listened to this woman for weeks. So that thing on her hand is a compulsory ear. It means I must listen, and she likes that. She went on. How much money do I have? None now, of course. You don't even know, she said, amused. Well, I'll tell you. 6 mil a month, euro dollar. That puts me in the top 1/10 of the top 1 percentile, I believe. And I'm in the credit economy, too. I'm not a civilian, you know, not legally. And with a credit level 1, you can have anything you want in this world, anything at all. This world? Goodness. Yeah, that's the narrator. Clothes? No. She went on. Food? Service? No. That's just ordinary life. You grubby little people think Mrs. Graham is foolish, don't you? And maybe you think it's foolish and strange and rich to buy a man, and strange and foolish and rich to buy a child. But one gets sick of renting people, and even sicker of renting pets. It's dull, and I don't enjoy politics. And there's one thing about bought people, if you're wise, they stay bought. You can't have it both ways, but I can. The old and the new.
Yeah, she's such a fascinating character to have in the story, especially when compared to the narrator.
Mm-hmm.
Just like...
The narrator, who is just so voluntarily impoverished.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, in this world, they're equal. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, the narrator has more riches in the form of the apothecary stuff and the gun and the agency.
Mm-hmm.
And Mrs. Graham doesn't have that at all.
No, she doesn't. And it's like, I love this too, where it's like, she just does that, or it's like, do you know how much money I have? And the narrator doesn't answer her. It's just outside of, it's untagged speech. You know, she's recounting it, and it's like, do you know how much money I have? None now, of course. Is it, I could buy anything in this world I want. This world? Question mark?
Yeah, there's no call and response. The call and response is all mental.
No,
and both of them are kind of both having a mental conversation with each other.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's actually interesting now that you're right, because it's like the narrator does this too, where it's like her conversations are predetermined also. She will just say, you know, her trembler thing, or like, you know, whatever, you know, nihilistic thing that she has inside.
Right. So in a way, there's this vast gulf between the two of them, even though they're communicating. That, you know, maybe that neither of them even really want to like reach.
Yeah. No, actually, I want to read this real quick
Please.
because it's so fucked up because it's like about her daughter. I didn't buy Lori for myself, you know. I thought I would, but it didn't work out like that. She was an awful sick little thing. She needed money like mine. That's why I chose her. Well, one reason. Do you know how many operations that child had? She was hooked up to a kidney machine when I first saw her, and she needed a heart implant. And dozens of things. This is kind of weird because it's like, this is kind of a little like Munchausen by proxy to me. Like that whole like...
I definitely get that.
So it's like, you know, she's fucking hell. It's like, no, I intentionally bought the sickest child because I wanted everyone to know how much money I have and what a caring mother I am.
Yeah, the choices she makes, considering that she could have literally anything, it's very telling about what she's actually like.
Yeah.
My quote is, it's after everybody is dead, pretty much.
Yeah.
Right? I think is Lori dead at this point too?
Yes.
On the way up, I saw lying among the bushes Cassie's white peplum. I think Cassie was inside it. Oh yes, I forgot to tell you. I know she was. I saw her. Wanted to circle around her and didn't. She was lying on her back, limbs a little sprawled, staring at the sun, and something uncharacteristic in the air, for there are few breezes here, was moving some strands of her hair up and forward over her face, up and forward, over and over again. I've seen people who died using that stuff. They usually lie down and are happy long before the end. I wonder what would have happened to her if... Please, I'd like to take another flight. This one doesn't fit my tour. Can I have another flight? I want to get my hair done at the hotel. Al and Bobby has gone to see the world. Lori is playing cards in heaven. I'm not alone yet. But when the broom wears out and crashes, when he falls off, when the bodies rot with their own internal bacteria, when they're all gone, when Lori is dust and Valeria earth, when Al and Bobby molders and sinks into some other continent, when Nathalie and John are bones in water and then air and then nothing, then I'll be alone. When Cassie is only a white flag, a shred of artificial silk, bits of sheeting abraded to powder and sunk into the ground, a few fibers slowly settling into the ground around the roots of plants, then I'll be alone. I'm alone. This section was very affecting to me because, I mean, you know, we'd gotten a lot of violence and contemplation of death up until that point, but this passage was savage to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's upsetting, you know, she's thinking about how things could have been, how things could be differently. And, you know, there's another passage we talked about before where she's like, maybe I didn't need to do this. Maybe this wasn't the right way to do it. Mm-hmm. But those are all what ifs and could be's and should have's.
Yeah.
And they're not the way it plays out.
And then this is another wonderfully toxic if, where it's like the one that's dropped, where it's like, if And I don't think it's really specified whether it's Cassie or the narrator that's supposed to be indicated in the italics. But it's like, what would have happened if? Please, I'd like another flight. Like that bit where it's like, and that's a thing that people think about too. Like where it's like, if only I hadn't caught that train, or
Oh, there's tons of stories like that. Everybody's got a story like that, and the truth is like that's never really relevant. But it's when you've got nothing but time to think about it. Of course, that's where your mind's gonna go.
Is it? I feel like the narrator is she's very interesting to me with this language of immersion, where like it kind of reminds me of we had to go through so much of Dark They Were and Goldeneye before we got to this kind of like environmental immersive language.
Right.
She kind of drops us in it where it's like she talks about Earth and it's like, you ever fallen into poison ivy? Like she talks about, or like frozen to death trying to walk back from an outhouse. It's like the encroachment of the environment upon you that is just so constant that you can't but succumb to it. Like it's always going to be a condition of your existence. And for this condition of her existence, for this condition of all of their existences, where it's like when she straps them all to the broom and just sets it to go, which I think is just a fascinating way to do it, where it's like you just strap a bunch of dead bodies to this hover device and just let it fly around the planet.
I know, it's a pretty great sight.
It is, like, and it's like if I kind of hope at some point someone makes this into a movie, because like I kind of want to see how that scene would play out.
Right. You can imagine the end of the movie just hearing like the tiny little bumps of it hitting something and traveling around slowly, making that noise.
If we wanted to make it funny, like it would just every so often she would just be in a new place and just like
and it would pass by. I mean, it would be a great way to show the passage of time, especially when the recordings start to get farther and farther out, or at least we lose the sense of passage of time.
Yeah.
We do know that she said seasons pass.
Yeah.
So you could definitely do a montage showing every once in a while when she's thinking about something, it's punctuated by that flying by.
Yep. No, and it's like, and all of their bodies, like the way that she talks about them just becoming, like, Uday seeking into continence, and when Cassie is only a white flag, like, because it's what she's wearing, like, or it's fucking, it's so, like, it's beautiful language, but it is, like, you're right, like, really frightening, because it's like, is that all we are? Just the traces we leave?
Yeah, and I didn't feel like this completely, but I feel like in certain moments you could kind of feel like her slipping her loss on humanity a little bit, and then sort of gaining it back in these moments of being reminded about the other people that were there. It's fascinating.
So this is after she's been living in the cave for a minute, and she starts hallucinating her old friend LB, who I guess sort of like got her into the Tremblers,
right?
Or who she met through them. It's boring, so boring. Pebble 3. I'll tell you about the Neo-Christians. They're nobody. It was just an intellectual fad. We used to meet in somebody's attic in graduate school. I was 30, LB was 35, until a media rep got hold of it, and then all of a sudden we were Neo-Christians everywhere, like amanita mushrooms. That's when I quit. Who wants to sit in an attic and argue about Descartes anyway? It was only stealing ideas, but I suppose it'll go into the history books as eclectic. History is all fantasy. It's boring. Starving is boring. I just went over everything I dictated to the vocoder, then I decided to leave it as it was. What's the use of listening? All you hear is your own voice. I had to rig up the machine to wake me in the middle of the night and whisper something shocking like, "We're going to get you." In my voice, of course. What if I had the tools?
It's a great insight into her, huh?
Yeah. Which I love that quote, because it's like, honestly, this is the thing that I try to fight in my own life, like, so much, is just like nihilism, or like weirdly genocidal thoughts.
Yep.
Like when I think like, oh, we're just horrible, the world would be much better off without humans, but then I think, oh wow, that was a genocidal thought, wasn't it? Maybe I should check that. But there's some like there's some charm into it in that kind of genocidal thought, in like the, well, then I know what the real problem is. Like, humanity is the real problem, but that's not.
There is an appeal to being able to blanket say that humanity is the problem, but as we've seen in this, it's much more nuanced than that. The problems come from within as well as without.
That's true, and it's like a thing where it's like Lori didn't deserve it. Like,
no, Lori didn't deserve any part of the trajectory that she has in her entire life.
No, And it's just so fucking sad that she had the misfortune of being shipwrecked on this planet with these people.
Yep.
And having the parents that she did who never taught her to value anything.
Anything. The enormous building I spoke in, or almost got killed in, the interior carpet sprayed and wall flocked in a certain extremely limited range of bright, stylized colors. Everything flat and dry to the touch, neither cold nor hot, and you can't smell anything except the carpets, if they're new. Or maybe the disinfectants blown through the air ducts at night. Brochures often describe the hologramic numerals hanging in front of the doors in such buildings as softly glowing, which means they're in the same range of colors as everything else, but the hail is dimmed a little so you can see them, and they carry the intangibleness and non-tactility of the place to the point of driving you gaga. Books say it, actors on TV say it, everyone says it except people. Yet the style of architecture is a good 80 years old. We are trapped in somebody's old dreams of utopia. Trapped outside what's really new. Modern Baroque is new. Think of those non-civilian buildings we know about. Great opal-streaked globes, each with its own separate stem. Those 64 square chessboards you find in Iowa, each grid half a mile on a side. Spaghetti clusters of transparent tubing for private homes, or the same stuff 20 times as big. Built over rivers or waterfalls for factories. Nobody keeps us out. Nobody forbids us. You can even go in and get yourself a tour, only you'll never learn enough to go home and reproduce it yourself, if you had the tools, which you don't. My God, how naive we were. If somebody tried to bust us up, we must have been going in the right direction. I mean Pops. The Pops, of course, not the other. And I knew it. And the media never even touching us. I just wanted to read that section because we get little hints about what this future is like and where these people come from and who the narrator is. Mm-hmm. And I thought this section just gives you so much. You get, the narrator's outlook on this future that she lives in. You sort of get this kind of Blade Runner-esque kind of old, new future that everyone's sort of decaying and living in.
Yeah.
And you kind of get a sense of what she and her movement were kind of about as well.
Yeah. No, and there's such a sadness to it, and it's like I know it's a statement about architecture, but it's just like this thing is. I love this line. We were trapped in somebody's old dreams of utopia, trapped outside what's really new.
Right, and isn't that that's the whole book?
Yeah.
I mean, they're trapped on this planet, but they're also trapped within the ideas of the previous civilization that they came from and what they're supposed to be doing other than just living and dying.
Yeah. No, if there was some utopia that could have been had on this planet, which the narrator... maybe her version of utopia could have been a place where she could just die in peace, where she could just come to terms with that reality for herself, without having to worry about all this other bullshit. But of course, everyone else had old dreams of utopia.
Right, and she's just living in it.
Yeah. And it's I love that if somebody tried to bust us up, we must have been going the right direction, where it's like her life in activism was very much like reacting to...
Reaction, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what she kind of defined herself as the outsider, as the trembler. She never had the same viewpoint as other people because she was always inherently outside of it.
Yeah, and I wonder too, where it's like, because it's like, I admire this character a great deal, even when she's fucked up, there's a part of me that gets it.
It's she's very relatable.
Yeah, it's like even her wrath is relatable.
Oh, absolutely. It's not out of nowhere. I think it's at least in terms of the story, it's earned.
Was it just real quick? This is in reaction to your line. It's on 85. It's a dreadful bore being outside history.
Yep.
When she gets to the point where she's starting to severely hallucinate scenarios that aren't happening, there's this one that she gets of she hallucinates or the hallucination of being rescued. All right, Stevie, we won't do it, and give a shot to him. He opened his eyes and cried, "All right, do it now." The number of old hands I've held saying, "Dying is a task." One wit answered, "Come and join me then." Hello, old wit. It never moves in stranger ways than when it moves inside us. There'll be hallucinations about being rescued, I know, croaking thinly, "No, let me die," with immense dignity, of course. And I'm carried out to the shuttlecraft by great, coarse, strong, disgustingly healthy people in uniforms with thick necks. Actually, it would be a little awkward trying to explain what happened to the others. You killed them? Why? They were trying to kill me. Why? To prevent me. From doing what? Dying.
And I love that because in a different novel, one that wasn't maybe subverting some of these ideas, that would be the ending of the story. No tongue in cheek at all.
That's almost the fucking end of William Golding's Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, isn't it great that order is restored, that someone has come here, and it like should, even though that ending is problematic because it's like the children are rescued from people who are fighting another war.
Right.
So it's like, it's not like they're being taken out of a society of violence. It's more like their violence is a microcosm. But no, like this one is just like, even the whole notion of being rescued. I love it because it's like Russ has read that book. And it's just like, oh yeah, but, no.
No, but that's not happening.
Yeah.
And even the narrator is very self-aware of that because of Russ knowing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like that.
But it's like one of those things where it's like, it almost feel like it's like a fucking Buddhist thought exercise almost. Why did you kill them? They were trying to kill me. Why are they trying to kill you? To prevent me from doing what? From dying. Like, it's almost a sentence like literarily that's like, did you ever read Beloved? There's a line in Beloved where she's talking about, it's about a woman who murders her daughter, who, sort of in an impassioned fit, murders her daughter so that she can keep her daughter from being passed back to her old master in the South so that she would be a slave.
Huh.
So she's, the old master comes to her farm in the North to try and, steal her back, take her out of Ohio, her and her kids, and she freaks out, takes her kids into a barn, and manages to saw through the neck of her youngest daughter. And she was going to do it to the others until, she was stopped. But her only response when people asked her why, it's like, if I hadn't killed her, she would have died.
A mercy.
Yeah. And it's like, it's kind of, I feel like that kind of same language is at play here, that same, weird philosophical problem.
Right. Because, the truth is, if all of that came to pass, and they were like, why did you have to kill them? Well, because they were insane and were trying to rape me. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that I get.
That's a better answer than...
But she simplifies it down to what matters most to her, how she sees the situation. And it does have a poetic simplicity to it.
Yeah. Even behind the mask of John Uday must have been something human, though, if you will pardon my cynicism, I doubt it, having had far too much to do with that type before. But Cassie, the point is, when I cross over, will I only meet Victor? And do people who have died naturally, as we call it, go somewhere different or cross over in some different way than those who have died by violence? This is physically and metaphysically silly, the whole damn subject, but it still does seem to have preoccupied people. Different heavens in Scandinavian mythology, different hells in Dante, no heaven at all for the Greeks. Ghosts stuck in the place they got strangled and so forth. If those seven and I ever get together, the only thing they'll want to do to me will be to kill me. And that will be rather difficult under the circumstances. Eternity with Victor, I could do worse. But Cassie, I know I'm romanticizing something about my own life, or something that isn't in my own life. We always make such distinctions between those of us who are us and those of us who are tables and chairs, and then some tables turn up and then some table turns up and thinks at you, criticizes you, talks to you, looks down on you, likes you. Little 12-year-old girls walking around with $1 billion of improvements inside them, like dolls with tape decks and a slot in the back. I love that.
I know, the imagery is so good, especially the dolls with tape decks and a slot in the back.
I know, that totally, I just have, Lil Lori, the Teddy Ruxpin, just right next to it. And it's 1976, so this totally prefigures Teddy Ruxpin.
Pretty close.
It's one of the things that I think is super fascinating is this statement, we always make such distinctions between those of us who are us and those of us who are tables and chairs. And then some table turns up and thinks at you. But it's I love that. It's one of the biggest problems I feel like humanity has is this sort of us-them mentality.
And objectification, yeah.
Exactly. And it's to actually turn people with your gaze into instruments. Like they did. They looked at her and they saw a vessel. Or they thought, oh, she has medicine. We could take that from her. They didn't look to her for any of the good contributions that she could make or even really ask her to be part of building anything new.
Not once.
No, they just basically said, well, you're here. We have a right to your body, so we're going to take that. And how unsettling it is to have, something that you regard as being an object think at you. I love that. I love that sentence, to think at you.
Yeah.
It's an act, it's active,
It's at odds with the table imagery because we don't expect the table to talk or think at us, but it does really symbolize the way they see her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, just essentially is use value, and was it the other use value, that's the way that we end that is the with that simile, comparing Lori to a doll with a tape deck in the back. Like, basically all of this money pumped into a person to turn it into the latest thing.
Latest and greatest. This is more of her, of the narrator, musing about her life, and as her life comes to an end, thinking about what was important to her. And she's talking about LB. I remember the third time we made love, and how I decided it must be so very different because the room was different. Or I was just precisely drunk enough, though I wasn't drunk at all. Or had eaten for once exactly the proper kind of dinner. He said it was because we had the contratuba in the room with us, and that the contratuba, alone among all the instruments of the orchestra, had a soul. My memory of him is built up of many, many times after this, all made into one, just like the year I was speaking for the Populars. And in just the same way, an intelligent, ruthless abstraction of what mattered, details plucked unhesitatingly from the real, unstable times and places, and put together into a meaning, a mosaic, a symbol, an icon. Because that's what mattered, and that's how it mattered. And because I knew more than I ever have before or since just what mattered and what meaning was. Meaning preserves things by isolating them, by taking them beyond themselves, making them transcendent, revealing their real insides by pointing beyond them. If we perceived everything, we would know nothing. There would be no pattern. I love this. I know I've said this before, but there's these passages where she has these sort of summing up of all of the thoughts in this book. And it's such a dense read for a short story, and there's so much going on in it, but each of these little passages, these little monologues, are able to put all the themes together and match them up. And I love the idea of finding meaning and everything boiling down until all that's left is the important parts, the important things that matter to you and what they mean to you.
Yeah. Well, no, and there's like, and this is a thing that I think is interesting because it's like I've been thinking a lot about sort of like duality and perverse dark sides lately. But this is one of the ones that I find so interesting about like this one is like, you know, it's sort of the, like, I feel like it's an important part of this novel for the narrator, and I think for the reader as well, is to understand a meaningful death, or like to understand how to approach death in a meaningful manner. And was it this one line where it's like meaning preserves things by isolating them, by taking them beyond themselves, making them transcendent, revealing their real insides. But it's like, I love that idea where it's like, and it's also like kind of perverse too, where it's like, how do you make something mean something? Well, you have to isolate it. You have to take it out of the norm. You have to make it more than itself, which is weird because things aren't more than themselves, right?
No.
Like,
And it's almost suggesting like she's being tumbled into some sort of precious gem or something like that by this experience, by being isolated as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of hinting at that, and it's definitely, it's got a finality to it as well.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite bits. She's been talking to her ex-boyfriend LB, or his ghost, and her hallucinations start turning on her. Like, you know, at first they were like, you know, sort of lovely, but then you know, it's sort of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory through that crazy tunnel, where all of a sudden candy gives way to nightmares. He says, "Oh my dear, you've committed murder. Go away." I said it again, totally shocked. "Go away." "But my dear, how can I love you if you've committed murder?" I started to cry. "Yes," I said. "All right, you Christian. Don't," I added. "You know it was self-defense." He merely looked at me. "Of course it was. Of course it was," I said. Of course it was. Of course it was, I said. "You saw it. I mean, if you're made of ectoplasm and all. I mean, running into the brush, yelling, 'Colonize, colonize,' and all that. They were going to force me to have babies. I was going to be tied to a tree and raped, for goodness sakes. It was a mass delusional system. LB, you know what they're like, and anybody who doesn't agree has to be shut up somehow because it's too terrifying. So I ran away, but they wouldn't let it be. They came back after me to drag me back into that insanity, and I killed them. I had to. I kept telling them we were all dead, you know? I kept telling them we were all dead, you know that. And we were. I bet they had a lot more fun chasing me than they would have had by dying slowly in a few months. It gave them something to do. And I might remind you, old buddy, that several of those nice people were trying to kill me." "Murderer," he said. I started crying again. I said, "You get out of here, you father. You just get out of here. This is not your cave, so you just haul ass." He said thoughtfully, "Murder. Pure murder. Don't you think? And for no reason, just because these people annoyed you. You assumed, of course, they ought to adapt to you. It never occurred to you that you ought to adapt to them. You simply didn't like them." I couldn't talk. He said, "Out of spite. Really, I think. Don't you? A hidden wish? Anger? The chance to do what you always really wanted to do?" I think what you always wanted, under the camaraderie, under the sociability, was the chance to be really and truly alone. Autocratically alone, one might say. Arrogantly alone. Probably the only person in history to depopulate an entire planet so easily. Pocket genocide, one might call it. And for spite, for sheer nastiness and bad feeling, and for no other reason. So I can hardly love you now, can I?
Yeah, this passage destroyed me.
Me too.
It's pretty hard. It was hard to read, and it was hard to listen to you read. I mean, it is shocking. I agree with everything that she said, but her angels on her shoulder have come to remind her of what she's really thinking and what she's trying to push away.
Yeah. No, and this is like her like temptation, as it were, where it's like, and I love that she even has her like get thee behind me Satan moment, where she's like, haul ass, I don't want to talk to you if you're just gonna be like this. But no, like this whole thing where it's like,
how can I love you?
Yeah.
You're a murderer.
And it's like, it's so crazy to me because I spent so much time in this novel just being on her side,
right.
Essentially just being like, it's completely unfair what they're doing to her. It's, incredibly backwards the way that they've set up their whole little shit. And then genocide comes up, and it's like, you just kill them, like, just because they annoyed you. And I think that that's interesting, where it's like, maybe we only work together as well with some people as we want to.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think that bringing up the idea that maybe this is exactly what she wanted all along. We talked before about, some people coming to this planet, it was sort of their perverse way of the monkey's paw of getting their dream to come true.
Yeah.
And he's suggesting through her subconscious in a way that this is what she wanted all along, was to be a self-appointed ruler of none.
Yeah. No, is it? And I love that, like, autocratically alone, where it's like, and it's weird because that should be nonsensical, but like, given the story we just read, it makes absolute sense. She's like tyrannical about her solitude in a way. And I've never considered that, like, that someone could possibly be tyrannical about solitude.
It's what's so effective about the fact that this is her recording.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, of course we're going to inherently be on her side. We've been hearing this from her side the entire time.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no, and it's like, I love this thing that she says where it's like, you heard them. You heard what they were, colonize. They were going to rape me. They were going to do all this stuff. And she says, it was a mass delusional system, LB. You know what they're like, and anyone who doesn't agree has to be shut up somehow because it's too terrifying. So I ran away. Like, no, but it's like that thing where it's like, yeah, they couldn't handle like someone speaking truth at them. Like, they couldn't handle someone actually telling them that they were going to die and probably very soon. But then it also...
They certainly couldn't handle her having those opinions and going off somewhere where they couldn't control her having them.
They couldn't, but there's almost this weird flip side to it where it's like, we know that she's totally right, but it's like, to them, did she seem crazy? Like this lady who's just like walking around with like her drugs and is just like, we're all just going to die, right? It's all bullshit.
An ex-cult lady with a gun and drugs who's telling everybody they need to give up hope and die, but also they have to stop her from, from letting her kill herself. And it's like, yeah, totally. From their point of view and from the society they come from, I absolutely would think of her as the bad guy right from the beginning, or at least a threat.
Yeah. What could I have done? Should have, couldn't. Should have thought, really arrogant, solitary, secretly cruel. I am. I used to say to myself, who isn't? But it isn't true. I've been unhumanly hungry and starved for years, as nasty as that starved rat, a cannibal. Wish they wouldn't be persuaded, and glad they weren't. Give it a good end. Go out in a great big bang. End to stupid parties after lectures, people I don't know, people I wanted to kick, trying to live without roots like an airplane, endless traveling with idiots, trying to pretend they're bright when I'd like to hit them, and I like them when I don't, and it doesn't matter when it does, and I ought to love that hateful, ghastly bunch, and oh Lord, what was I doing there anyhow? I rather enjoyed killing them off than I don't care, except Cassie. Alan Bobby hit in the head with a rock, good for him. Nathalie, shot, good for her. John Uday, shot, good. Lori, fine. Val, best of all. Goody, good for them. It's a game they understood inside out. And once I started playing, I rather liked it because I'm not exactly an amateur either, you understand. And it's all yummy self-assertion, all big adventure. Isn't it? Oh my. Creeping about the cane brake and in our underdrawers trying to pot each other? No. I had to. I really had to. But all the same, I did. What? Pocket genocide? I guess so. Up to the elbow in blood. Poetry. And now I have to live with this awful, awful woman. this dreadful, wretched, miserable woman until she dies.
Yeah.
I fucking love that. It's dark. She admits it. She likes look, I guess there was a dark thing there.
There was a darkness, and I embrace it.
I got a little carried away, and it's like, she's not like, and I love it too, where it's like, it's that sort of like, if you think yourself to be sort of a good person, set against like horrible people, like it can be really easy to be like, look, I didn't want to play this game, you all brought me into it, but it's like, but then I hoped you wouldn't change.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I'll do these things because you made me do it, but I'm glad you made me.
Yeah. No,
and once I'm in, I will enjoy it.
And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't think it's necessarily madness, because it's like an interesting tug of war that we're seeing between these two, like sort of the, I should have cared for this bunch, and like the remorse she expresses at the end versus I'm glad they didn't listen to reason.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that maybe not, at least I hope not as extreme as this story, but we've all been there where we were pushed to something that instinctively inside we were hoping to be pushed to, and when we were pushed, we let it all go out. Mm-hmm. We gave into it completely. Yeah. I think we can all relate to going to that place.
I think we can too. Man.
Wow.
So that's our first novel.
As a good story, I come away, I feel shocked. I feel like someone splashed me with cold water. And a lot of the feelings that I felt reading this have all come back up again. There were a lot of moments I wanted to cry in this book. It was quick. It was short and it was brutal, but it was also metaphysical, and it pondered a lot of different things about human nature. I really loved it, and definitely a very strong feminist work.
Yeah, no, she's phenomenal. Like, we should do some more Joanna Russ later.
I 100% agree. We should definitely do more Russ.
Yeah, no, I'm super and this novel gave me a lot to meditate on, and of the few things sort of like we were talking about, where it's like I'm being more critical of genocidal thoughts that I have, as it were. Just like whenever I think the world would be better off without humans, I just immediately nip that in the bud, and we'll like try and think of something a little, and not necessarily more positive, but something that's not nihilist.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of steps between a nihilist and optimist that you can take without having to jump all the way into the deep end of either side.
Exactly. No, I've been meditating on that a lot, and just also like the place of resistance. Because I think that is an incredibly powerful aspect of this book, is how even in a government of 8, you still have to form your own resistance.
Yeah, and if you really want to be your truth, sometimes that means being on the outside. Even when you have a whole new situation and a whole new government set up, you still find yourself on the outside if that's where you need to be.
Exactly. And it's like there's, if you ever get a chance, there's this book by Giorgio Agamben. It's called Homo Sacer, but it's basically just all about that, sort of like this, the philosophical and ontological implications of being outside of society, or being marked to be outside of society. It's a very good
I will have to read that.
Speaking of which, did you want to talk about anything else, or you want to do related reading?
I do.
All right.
Let's jump right in.
Let's jump right in. Do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I think that there's a theme among all the things I chose, and I'll just list first, and then we can go into that. For movies, I chose Castaway, 2000 Robert Zemeckis film.
Nice.
With Tom Cruise. Yep.
Tom Hanks.
Did I say Tom Cruise?
You did say Tom
Cruise.
Strike
it from the record. Ouch.
We'll edit it out in post.
I mean, that sounds like a fascinating movie, don't get me wrong, but yeah, Tom Cruise, sure. Tom Hanks. Swiss Army Man, 2016 comedy film with Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano, and Battle Royale.
Nice.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason I chose all of those is pretty obvious, is that all of those movies are about, in one way or another, people who are stranded in some way from society and are pushed into conflict with survival and with themselves. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they're all tonally very different, especially if you're going to compare Castaway and Swiss Army Man as being a similar subject. One of those is just a straight up like watching a man survive and go through the ordeal, and Swiss Army Man sort of takes a more comedic kind of like finding happiness within madness after you give up on society. Mm-hmm. So I like the way those two go together, and then Battle Royale fits in with my book choice, which is Lord of the Flies.
Nice.
I think you really can't be talking about any of these without talking about those two together.
No, you totally can't.
And then I just wanted to add Survivor by Chuck Palahniuk, because that's about a character who is out of a cult, is religious, and who finds himself on the outside of everything and possibly about to commit large-scale murder.
Mm-hmm.
And then on after all of those, also to fit into kind of the Robinson Crusoe story, I wanted to do J.G. Ballard's Concrete Island story. The story's protagonist, Robert Maitland, a wealthy architect, finds himself stranded on an artificial island. Now, it is science fiction, but just barely, because it basically it takes our idea of these long stretches of highway with nothing underneath them other than like docks or old warehouses, and extends it even further to say that there's nothing but freeway overpasses, and that if you fall off one of those, you're basically off the map of society. And so even though our main character, a wealthy architect, has everything he thinks he needs, one car crash leads him to realize that he's just about as far from civilization as you can possibly be while being right next to it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I mean...
What was that one called again?
Concrete Island. And
I'm going to check that out. That sounds really super good.
It's very good. I probably read that every 3 or 4 years just to kind of remind myself about, what we take for granted about how far away civilization can seem once you lose any or all of the pieces of it.
Yeah. Oh, good choices, dude.
Those are my recommendations.
Was it, I don't have that many. I got a couple. Was it, I'd say, at first I'd give a soft to moderate recommendation for Paul Theroux's novel, The Mosquito Coast, which is also a film starring Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. Film adaptation's pretty good. River Phoenix is in it also. Little baby River Phoenix.
Oh, I'm going to have to watch this.
It was actually a pretty good movie because it's like, the basic plot of it is there's this guy who's like, he's an inventor and he like has all of these like really like, he's like a super leftist and has all these views about America in the 80s about how it's like just consumer crazy run amok and like, that we're just destroying the environment. It's all fucking true. Like that's the thing that's even worse. But like he's such like an alarmist that he just decided he's going to take his family and move to Honduras and just like live in the jungle and be just like completely self-sufficient with like zero carbon imprint and like completely free of society. Unfortunately, people live in Honduras, so like, yeah, basically he tries to live this like very like staunch like ascetic life and is constantly being assailed by missionaries from one end or like pirates or like people just trying to take a shit. And it's like as it goes on, almost everything he attempts scars the environment even worse. So it's like, he's very much like, I feel like if the debate at the end of the book that she has with her ghost ex-boyfriend, I feel like that's most of this book is like I just wanted everything to be good, and it's like you also did horrible things to do that. Like, so that's a good one. I would give a recommend to the video game The Last of Us.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I'm not gonna ruin it for you, or listening to a science fiction podcast. You played it. You played it.
You did.
But no, it's the same impossible choice that you get at the end, where it's like, do I like what's more important to me? Like, do I kill to preserve liberty type of deal, even if it means that the human race dies out as a result.
What is freedom and what is survival?
Exactly. So was it those two? And my final recommendation would be Joss Whedon's The Cabin in the Woods.
Yes.
And mainly for the end. If you haven't, don't listen to this if you haven't seen it or you don't want spoilers, but in the end, basically, we find out that humanity is keeping elder gods at bay with a very specific set of sacrifices of certain people. And at the end, there's this woman and her friend, and she turns on him. Basically, they have an instant where they can stop the end of the world by sacrificing their best friend, and they actually just decide that it's not worth it. Like, that if you have to kill one innocent person, they would just rather bring on the elder gods.
Right, and God, I love that choice that they have to make.
Yeah.
It's like the choice between making a difference and stopping all of this killing for nothing, or ending the whole cycle and just letting it be. Mm-hmm. And they do that while smoking a joint.
It's just such a good
perfect
movie.
Ending to a movie.
No, Sigourney Weaver was there. It was just so good.
Yeah.
But no, and I love that idea too, where it's like, because it also reminds me of this narrator in a certain way as well, because some people would look at her and like just be like, oh my god, I can't believe you did that. Like, do you understand the ramifications that what you've done? And it's like, yeah, it's super polarizing.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a very good comparison for Cabin in the Woods because people would call, rather than calling the Elder Gods monsters, they would call these two people monsters
Yeah.
for upsetting the whole system and killing everyone.
Which is weird. It might have been us in this reality, us included. Like, we'd be like, everything was alright, and apparently all that needed to happen was just 5 people needed to die. And then it's weird, because then it gets us into that Omelas territory, like, wow, how much are you willing to put up with?
So at this point, we're just haggling on how much blood is necessary for this clean world, right? How much blood do you think?
I could never do more than a pint.
Any more than a pint, and I start seeing the unicorns.
Alright, well, this has been Greetings from the Mirror Zone. I've been Bryce Skidmore.
And I have, as always, been David Leskin.
Have yourselves a good night, folks, and we will see you next month.
Nanu, nanu.
Nanu, nanu. The music you are now hearing is the Sacrificial Dance from Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which, as we speak, is hurtling through space on a golden record attached to the Voyager probe. Thank you for listening to this episode of Greetings from the Mirror Zone. Join us next week when we will be joined by a guest to discuss 2 short story fantasies, Saki's The Interlopers and Stockton's The Lady or the Tiger. Please like and subscribe to us, give us a good review on iTunes and SoundCloud, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I am at Bryce_Skidmore, and Luskin is at Alfred Packer. Have a good night.